Okay,
we
we're live.
have a live indicator here, and in case we are, good afternoon to everybody, good morning to some people somewhere in the planet, and good something to everybody else. It is 2:34 p.m. In my time zone, 4:34 in Eastern time, and we just got a Nexus 5, just out of the blue, just like that. We've been waiting for this phone for the longest time, and yeah, Google just decided to make the phone public today. Without letting anybody, no events, nothing official. We were kind of expecting this for tomorrow. So everything that's happening now, we kind of had planned for tomorrow. But anyways, Google just decided to spoil my lunch. So in order of appearance, we have a great team here to talk about our thoughts of what just went on. We're going to cover the news, and then we're going to go through what we think of everything. So in order, Mr. Taylor Martin, hello to you, sir. How are you?
Hello, I'm great, and I've got a pumpkin here just for the Halloween festivities.
That pumpkin kind of reminds me of somebody, but I can't say until like about a month from now. Probably Michael understands what I'm talking about.
Because I certainly don't.
I'm pretending.
Mr. Joe Levi, who does not have a pumpkin, and I'm trying to figure out where you are, Joe.
I am on location in the parking lot at my day job, but, I love Pocket Now and I love my Nexus, so I'm here.
You're a trooper, Joe. Thank you very much.
Joe, you got a good hairstyle going on today. I'm really liking what's going on there. You got like some altitude with that coif.
Yeah, this is my 7 a.m. podcast hair.
I think that's his Michael Fisher look. Looks kind of familiar. I don't know why.
Be careful, that's trademarked.
Yeah. Reminds me of George Michael, huh?
Oh.
And then Mr. Michael Fisher, how are you?
I am well. I feel like I was just broadcasting from this very booth a second ago. We were at the Pocket Now Weekly this morning. Joe Levi and Taylor Martin and Anton Dinod and I talking about the Nexus 5.
Shirtless Taylor Martin.
Shirtless Taylor Martin. We were watching the come in on the Twitter feed, and I was like, "There's no way. We're just going to have another day where it's not happening." And then it happened. I feel constrained to point out before we move on to the last person to introduce. Jaime mentioned that Google gave us a Nexus 5, was I think the phrasing. That is not correct. We do not have a Nexus 5 yet.
Yeah.
Google gave the world a Nexus 5. So if you're expecting to see one on this show, you should not be expecting to see one on this show yet.
Except for wait. I don't know.
Oh, come on.
Just kidding.
That's just low-class nonsense.
I was half expecting you to pull out.
Stephen Shank, how are you?
Hi. See, I was half expecting Keller to pull out like a piece of cardstock he had just printed the official press render on, or like glued onto, I don't know, an iPhone 3GS or something. But I am well.
Isn't that funny how, like, just literally, like, 2 hours ago, if one of us even had one of the in-store dummy, like, units, like, that would have been huge news. Like, we would have gone crazy over that.
That's the past now, man.
Somebody published the video over lunch of the phone, and they were just playing around with the phone, and I was trying to understand why the video got so many dislikes, and as it turns out, I started reading the comments, and everybody's like, the phone's already live, buddy. They already announced it. What are you trying to leave?
Oh, sad.
Paying YouTube upload times.
Yeah. Okay, so 2 disclaimers. Number 1, Google has just totally destroyed us with this new Hangout interface. Everything looks weird. And if we look weird, or if we haven't figured something out, or, sorry about this, guys, we're trying to figure this out just as much as I'm sure a lot of people at Google are. And number 2, my connection is terrible. This is the 3rd time we've tried this. So in case I drop off for any reason, the rest of the team will continue covering, and I will try to hop on like I always do. So anyways, without further ado, and I know certain people hate that phrase, let's start talking about this. We have a little bit of a schedule of amount of things that we want to discuss, so we'd like to start with Stephen. We'd like to discuss the Nexus 5. What have you learned about this phone? What can we expect? No, because the 16 gig model is already sold out. So tell us about it.
Yeah, luckily we heard a lot about this phone, coming up to the actual launch, so we knew pretty much what to expect, and I don't think there have been any big surprises. The specs have largely been exactly what we were looking at. The Snapdragon 800, the 1080p nearly 5-inch display, and like you said, the 16, and there's also a 32 gigabyte model. Now, it does look like the availability is a little better than it was with the Nexus 4. And while there have been, we saw the 16 gigabyte model drop out Google was showing it's not available anymore. It did come back, and I think now it's gone again. This is for just the U.S. But it seems to be holding out better than the Nexus 4. It didn't disappear instantly. And last I checked, the 32 gigabyte model is still available and shipping November 8. So if you want to order one still, you can have it within just a little over a week.
I think they're completely sold out now.
By now? Okay.
Probably.
In the half hour
been like
since
2
I last
minutes.
checked. Yeah, but it does keep coming. Once they're out, they have been coming back. So keep checking if you really, really want one. Also, like we saw last year, remember with the Nexus 4 when it was sold out, if you kept hammering away on it, sooner or later, sometimes you got the opportunity to buy one. So do keep trying if you want one.
Black and white are still available by November 8th, and 32 gigabyte 16 is done.
Okay, so you have some
just-
options there.
Just a little note there. When I got mine in, I was told that it would ship by November 5th. So this is the second batch, theoretically, that's going out on the 8th. And I presume we'll see those batches continue to go forward. So keep an eye on the dates, the ship-by dates.
Now, we'll be doing an update on the actual specs. We're going to do a rundown later on today showing you the phone versus all the other flagships. I just want to quickly mention about the G2, since that's what the Nexus 5 is based on. It's very similar to the G2, but there's a few little differences. Nexus 5 has a smaller battery, only 2,300 milliamp hours. Google says you can get, I think, 8 hours of web browsing on it, or 17 hours of talk time, I believe was the figure. So
And something like 60 hours of straight music playback. It's something crazy like that.
300 hours standby, so maybe they'll be able to pull it off even with a smaller battery. That does let the phone slim down a little. It's about half a millimeter thinner than the G2, and it's also a little bit lighter, I think 13 grams lighter. But also the front-facing camera got a little bit of a downgrade compared to the G2.
It's thinner than this. You're kidding.
That's what they say. But you won't be able to notice it. It's so tiny.
And it's 130 grams, which is exactly as massive as the Galaxy S4 was, right? But then there's the difference in material around back, which is interesting, where it's like, oh, this is as light as the S4, but it's probably going to feel a bit better in the hand thanks to the soft touch versus the glossy stuff.
I feel like a Nexus 7.
Yeah.
And you think that soft touch is going to be, for those of you that ordered the black model, Michael, do you think that's going to be a fingerprint magnet, a smudge magnet? Would you recommend the white model better?
Well, I'll tell you what, I've got a white one coming to, and I know we're going to see a black one, so I think we're going to have to see. I am more interested in knowing whether the material changes in the tactile, responsiveness. That's not what I mean. I want to see if the material feels different between the black one and the white one, because
Like
that's what
this.
we see from the Note 3. Exactly, Taylor. Yeah, it's exactly.
I had reviewed the black Note 3. It felt great. This one feels meh.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I like the black one a lot better, trust me.
Yeah, same thing with this.
And
But
if you don't
anyways-
like those colors, there's a number of different case options. There's a red and a yellow official bumper. There's also a black and gray bumper and white and black cases with a little folder to cover the front as well.
Stephen, do you know if those
I was
cases
going to ask you, is that folder, does it have a magnetic latch to turn the display on and off, or is it a typical...
I was wondering about that. I haven't seen anything mentioned about that, and I couldn't tell just by looking, but it seems like the sort of feature we would expect. So I don't know just yet.
do you know
So
if
the
cases
mechanics
do
of it,
anything-
I don't know, but it is an active cover, so when you open it, it will skip the swipe to unlock. It'll automatically turn on and off. Whether that's by proximity or by a magnetic clasp, they didn't say.
And there's no window this time, like we see on the the Note or with the G2. It's just a little cutout for the speaker.
Does the cover do anything to affect the Qi wireless charging ability of the Nexus 5? Do we know that?
It says that it's officially compatible with the Nexus wireless charger. They're just calling it the Nexus wireless charger at this point. But it is compatible.
I
They
know
have a
that
new one.
the device itself is. I just wonder if the cases affect that.
Yes, the case, one of the line items they said on both the bumpers and the flip cases is that they are still compatible with
Very good.
Qi wireless charging.
Cool.
Good.
Now, for those interested in buying, Stephen, we remain in the same policy, right? It's only available in the Google Play Store. No carriers have picked it up just yet, and you can just get it for the same $350 or $400, right?
I know T-Mobile mentioned they're definitely going to have it in stores. I don't think they gave a date. But there's a lot better band support this time around. And we saw CDMA support, not WCDMA for 3G, but CDMA like Verizon and Sprint, which is weird because we're not used to seeing those sort of phones sold separately from the carrier. So I'm still waiting to find out exactly how sales of those are going to work, but this looks like we're going to have a universal model that's going to work everywhere in the U.S.
With the exception of Verizon, it is not for
That's
Verizon.
confirmed? Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Okay, so
we have
more information
3
on
CDMA
that.
bands for Sprint, and I think 9 LTE bands total.
Yeah. Joe, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, so looking at the release notes, we're going to have the stock version, just like we had the Nexus 4, available through the Play Store. They went on to specifically say that there are going to be additional places for resale coming this holiday season or before the holidays, I think is the wording that they used. And they listed places like Best Buy and Sprint as a separate item. So I assume that we're going to be getting a separate Nexus 5 that has the separate a separate version of the Snapdragon 800 chip, like we talked about in the weekly this morning, that carries the CDMA stuff that you'll get in the Sprint stores. So it's not 100% confirmed, but that's how I'd assume based on the way it was presented. Unfortunately, it's not going to be like one universal device.
But the listing, the listing in the Play Store now does say it has that CDMA band on it.
That's weird. I don't know.
Yeah,
I could be wrong.
And you know, it wouldn't be like the first time that it's done. Obviously, the iPhone 4S wasn't an LTE-capable phone, but it was one universal unit for CDMA and HSPA+. It was one thing. Where it changed in the iPhone 5, obviously because of how complicated LTE is. So yeah, we most probably will be getting a separate unit, which I hope not. I hope that it's one universal phone and that people will be able to swap around their networks as much as they can, because just think about it. I mean, you right now have to pay $300 on contract to get a Note 3 with the Snapdragon 800 processor and most of the specifications that you get on this Nexus 5, and for $50 more, or $100 more, you can get a Nexus 5 off contract. This is crazy. This is just crazy. I mean,
it's beautiful.
It's a no-brainer. I mean, these people, Google is really, like, they've tried to disrupt the market for so long, but this is like the best way. You can't disrupt the market with a low-end or mid-tiered phone. You can do it even if it's priced right. You can do it with a top-of-the-line, high-end phone, so much so that the phone is already sold out.
Well, the Nexus 4 sold out just as quickly, if not faster. But
Yeah,
I mean,
faster.
But it's a different beast, because last year Google wasn't trying to create the most impressive and highly spec'd phone. It was trying to prove that you don't need great specifications to have a great phone.
True.
And I think they got the message across very well, and so has Motorola and a lot of others, but that doesn't mean that you don't need or maybe want high-end specifications, and now Google catering to that as well. So.
Until you took the first photograph.
Yeah.
Shut up.
Yeah. The Nexus 4, the Moto X are two examples of terrible cameras, and well, the Nexus 5 is supposed to have a better camera, but
yeah, reports about
I've seen some.
We shouldn't gloss over that, because this camera does take a step down in resolution, but as I mentioned in a piece that just published an hour ago, it has.
I was about to ask you, Michael. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that it has OIS is great, because OIS is kind of the new buzzword of the new year, and or the year that's about to close out. And in contrast to the resolution war, it deserves to be there. Like, OIS brings real advantages, and it can, as we've seen with the HTC One, it can even take a really low-end, low-resolution camera and allow it to do wonderful things. So I think this may well be the
branding.
Right. I think this may well be the first Nexus we see that delivers a pretty good camera experience. We'll have to see, you know, in concert with the HDR Plus stuff and all the stuff the software stuff that Google has packaged in there.
No, and I think, like, for example, both Taylor, you, Michael, and myself, all three of us had a G2.
Yeah.
And we universally agreed that was the Android camera to beat. It was.
Well, I didn't have much experience with it.
Oh yeah, because Taylor's was busted. Yeah, so no, that's a good point, Jaime, and that's actually really directly related to what we're talking about here, because the Nexus 5, you know, as we've said, is kind of the G2 Nexusified, and like besides the resolution duck there, I think we're going to see some pretty impressive stuff from this sensor. There was some speculation. I think Brian Klug at Anantech was speculating that it might be a Sony sensor based on the specifications that have been published. And if so, it would be very interesting to see that Sony sensor made into OIS. So
yeah, we heard that earlier. We were talking about that confusion over a MEMS component. But the one point that stuck was Sony sensor.
Right.
Well, the iPhone 5S has a Sony sensor, and so far it doesn't have OIS, and it pulls some very amazing low-light photos. So I think we should expect something good. I mean, if we get the same or probably same sensor matched with OIS, this should be like probably the camera to beat as well.
We will see. I think at this point it would just behoove Google to shoot par. You know, it's like if they can deliver a good shooting experience on a Nexus, that's fine for this year. That's all they need to do.
Decent, passable. Yeah, I've seen some sample photos from people at Google, and some of them aren't so great. So I'm not gonna throw all the eggs in that one basket. I'm probably going to buy a Nexus 5, but I think the phone for me is as much as I love stock. I think that's the phone for me. So.
No, well, anyways, any other points to discuss about the Nexus 5, Stephen? Anything else that we've forgotten to cover?
No, I think we've seen or we've covered everything that we wanted to so far. The only question I've still had in my mind is what this new wireless charger is going to sell for. But other than that, the stuff is out there. The hardware is going to be arriving in just a week or so. We're going to finally get a lot of hands-on reports from users letting us know what they think about the photos, what they think about battery life, and finally be able to get a full assessment of what the Nexus 5 is going to mean.
Yeah, don't expect a cheap price on those accessories, though, because Google always jacks up their prices on accessories because the hardware is sold so cheap. Like the case for the Nexus is what, $40?
The bumper 7? Case, and the flip cover is $60, I believe.
Well, the Nexus 7 case, I mean, it's not cheap.
I'm talking Nexus 5 stuff. They're coming soon, but they're spendy.
Yeah, and the wireless charger for the Nexus 4 was $60 or $70. Stuff's not going to be cheap, but more than makes up for it having a phone that just costs a fraction of the cost of another phone. So.
At least with the compatibility, you can always pick up a cheap, Nokia charger for like $25, and it'll work.
No. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. If anybody wants my Nokia charger, I would gladly sell it to them.
So there's a reason they're so cheap.
Well, there's Tilt also has that wonderful line of View chargers. There's a lot of cheap compliant stuff out there that's actually really good. So
like your face.
Everything else that I've used that's cheap compliant is great. Just the Nokia one.
Yeah.
Now,
sorry, I had to say that, Michael.
Just to follow up with the schedule that we have here, how about if we run things down comparing the Nexus 5 against the Nexus 4, Taylor? I mean, you had the Nexus 4. It was probably your favorite phone. Joe had the Nexus 4. Steven has a Nexus 4. Yeah, Joe, kill me with that back take. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Now,
it's mahogany.
Taylor, for those of you that have a Nexus 4 right now, is it worth the upgrade, Taylor?
Yeah. That's pretty much a no-brainer. I mean, if you're happy with your Nexus 4, then fine, don't buy it. No. But if you're not and you're thinking it's feeling a little dated, because a lot of people felt the Nexus 4 was a little underpowered when it came out, at least in comparison to other high-end phones, and this is a major upgrade. This isn't like iPhone 5 to iPhone 5S or Galaxy S3 to Galaxy S4. This is big. It's a leap. Because Google went from kind of... I'm getting a call on my computer. But I can't answer that anyway. But we're going from something that's kind of, a moderate spec phone to something that is in line with all of the highest end specs that you can get on anything. So yeah, it's definitely a big upgrade, and it's definitely worth the price, because you could probably offload your Nexus 4 for maybe half the price of a Nexus 5.
Yeah.
I was just looking on Craigslist to figure out what I could get for mine if I wanted to sell it.
I sold mine a few weeks ago, and I'm sure that didn't make Brandon... It probably didn't make Brandon too happy, because he's like, hey, we're going to get you to compare the Nexus 4 and Nexus 5. And I'm like, oh.
No, you're not.
Sorry. And I think this, for me particularly, this brings us back to the time of the Nexus 1. When the Nexus 1 was announced, it was the first 1 gigahertz processor. It was, I'm trying to remember how many firsts this phone...
It was the first Snapdragon.
It was the first Snapdragon processor in the market. I remember this phone being so. It was the thinnest Android smartphone of the day.
That light up trackball.
Ooh, I love that thing.
Yes, bring it back, Google.
Yeah, and you know, this is we are finally back to that. The Nexus S was not a big leap compared to the phones that were out there. The Galaxy Nexus wasn't a big leap. It didn't innovate. There were already 720p displays in the market. The Nexus 4 was, we could say, a little bit of a step back to what was already in the market by the fall of last year. And now when we see the Nexus 5, this is just a no-brainer. This is really a no-brainer. You know, unless you want to shell out more money for an on-contract, you know, deal or something, there's really no reason to not buy this phone. Meaning, it's probably one of the most attractive devices in the market. In the all right, fine. Why not? Why not?
Listen, I've been over here. I've been sitting quietly listening to this. Listen, I'm not saying it's an ugly device. Okay, we talked a little about this in the podcast this morning. It's not an ugly device, but it also does nothing to stand out. And the argument in favor of that is, well, let it get out of the way of the software. The story's about the software. It's a Nexus device. Fine.
Hey, that sounds like what I said.
Yeah, well, no. I don't like that story. I mean, it should be a unified experience, and the hardware should lend something to that. And of course, you get that in terms of the internals. You get the Snapdragon 800, you get the OIS and the camera that I like. But if you look at the casing, and, you know, we'll get one in the office, and we'll either confirm this or I'll be like, I was wrong. It almost looks like reference hardware. I mean, there's nothing really special about it. You know, it kind of reminds me of the Z10 a little bit, where it's like, oh, I mean, yeah, this is fine, I guess. You know, I mean,
the Nexus 4 was super fragile. You had to have kid gloves on the whole time, but it was pretty.
Yeah, right, exactly. At least the Nexus 4 said something. And as I said in the podcast this morning, the Nexus S even, the like reviled Nexus that nobody wants to remember, is like, at least that was doing something cool with a curved glass over the screen with a little bulb on the bottom. Like, at least it was different. And this Nexus 5, the Nexus 5 is just kind of like, hey, look, I'm here, and yeah, I'm hardware. It's okay. Look at the software. Like, that's what it's doing.
Now tell me something, Michael. Tell me something. So if you had the choice, and I mean, let's disconnect ourselves from our pocket now roles, and let's see ourselves as the average person out there. If they gave you the option to buy, okay, how many phones do we have right now that are Snapdragon 800 powered and that have most of the specifications that the Nexus 5 has? All we have are the Galaxy Note 3, the LG G2. What else?
The S4 has a variant with the 800.
But you can't get it in the United States. So let's talk United States right now. All you have is the G2 and the Galaxy Note 3. And now you have the Nexus 5. So if we were to compare, you know, getting these two phones on contract, $200 for one, $300 for the other, or pay an extra $50 to get this whole package off contract, do you think that won't make you consider it? You know, do you think that that's not big enough?
If we're confining ourselves to this world in which the Snapdragon 800 is some kind of like boundary that we give a shit about, crap about, you know what I mean? It's like because I don't necessarily like. Remember, Jaime, I carry the Moto X more often than I carry any other smartphone, and this has been like, you know, on the spec sheet, people are like, whatever, I don't know how to make of this because they made something custom, and it's like, oh, it's not high spec. No, F off. Like, I don't care about that.
I can't be the only one that likes this hardware, though. I can't be the only one that likes the Nexus 7.
I like the Nexus 7.
I love it. I love the hardware.
I like the design. Nexus 7. Like, Michael doesn't like the design of the Nexus 5, but I actually do. I find it simplistic.
Michael doesn't like it because it's not hipster enough.
As well. I would never argue that I don't find it simplistic.
I just can't get around the giant camera thing.
You don't like the giant camera?
Yeah, that I don't.
And I don't
know
like
about
on the
that.
case. They kept the cutout just as big. Why not just shrink it down to the size of the lens?
Because the lens is conveying a message. It's saying the same thing the 1020 is saying. It's saying, look, this camera is a.
I'm ugly.
It might be saying I'm ugly. Depends on your hearing, I suppose.
Listen, I think that bulge is there simply because fitting the OIS in that casing was too difficult. Apple did it with the iPod Touch. They made it so thin that they couldn't fit the lens in there, and so it has this hump on top of it to fit the lens. And I feel that that's the reason why they did it with the Nexus 5.
That could well be, yeah. And especially if the Nexus 5 is thinner than the G2, because the G2 they managed to fit OIS in there and kept the lines. But if it's thinner, then yeah. That makes
and it's mainly because of the curve in the chassis. Because of
Right.
that bump, that's what allows for OIS to fit there. But
Right.
overall, I guess we have mixed feelings. Some of us like the phone, some of us don't like the phone. I personally, this is like I do like the phone. For me, it's like, why not? At that price, why not?
Yeah. See, I'm probably going to buy one either way, but
Probably.
it doesn't matter.
I'm on the fence too.
Yeah, I'm going to buy one, but it's probably going to sit more than anything. I mean, that's kind of how my Nexus 4 was. I bought it because it was so cheap, and then I would pop my SIM card in it when I got tired of
Inexpensive.
or something else.
Inexpensive, not cheap.
Cheap.
So that's
value.
Yeah, no.
And you're cheap, okay?
When
It's
we
a
all talk,
high-value, low-cost phone.
when we all talk about ourselves and we're using many devices, we're a very different set. But like, I get your point. Inexpensive is a powerful motivator, particularly when you're talking about specs like this. The Nexus 5 is not a bad device, and I don't dislike it. I don't want to convey that impression. But it's just interesting because the Nexus, we're no longer in the same world as we were, where you can now get the stock Google experience on a Moto X, on a Play Edition S4, on an HTC One. It's more expensive, yes, but you can do it. A Nexus device is not your only route to stock Android. So I think that's interesting.
And we're going to discuss the competition in a little bit. But go ahead, Joe. Go ahead. Yep.
So let me jump in and answer the question that you asked long ago there, if I'm not a robot. I went from a Galaxy Nexus, which I thought was a really, really good device, and I bought the Nexus 4. And honestly, I could have done without that upgrade because there's not a lot of difference between the two. They're both solid devices. Now, going from that, again, from the Nexus 4 up to the next one, the Nexus 5, having not held it in hand, but just looking at the raw specs, that's a huge jump. We're talking about what would have been a 2-year jump before in this 1-year jump from the 4 to the 5. Part of that is because the 4, I feel, was under-spec'd. It was lower than what it could have been and lower than what it should have been, but it is what it is. The 5 is the latest and greatest hardware. It's the best that you can get. So if you've got a 4, a 5 is definitely going to be worth it for you. It was worth it for me. I went out, spent the money, and ironically, I'm getting the white one too, Michael. So it's on its way in the first batch. So.
And I was actually going to segue towards you, Joe, in our topic list, mainly because of two things. Number one, and I'm just going to set it out there. I even tweeted this like about a week ago, where, the Snapdragon 800 has been so big for me. It's like the Haswell processor on laptops. It is just so power efficient and just so powerful on its own that it dares me to actually recommend the phone that is rocking it, even if I haven't tested it, just because of how reliable it's been for me on the G2 and on the Note 3. That's my thought. I mean, just because it has that processor, I'm like, okay, just because of that, I'd buy the phone. But aside from processing power, we also have to talk about Android 4.4. So, how do you feel about these two things, Joe? Obviously the spec bump. Plus, what can we learn from 4.4? What can you tell us?
Okay, so the spec bump is important, but not as important as it may be. It's important for the Nexus 5, but not as important for Android 4.4 KitKat. So first of all, we've talked about the Moto X a little bit, so let's segue right into that. A lot of people have been wondering, are we going to get the same kind of ambient listening stuff that we have with the Moto X in the Nexus 5 and with Android 4.4? And the answer is sort of. If you are on your home screen, you can now say, OK, Google, and tell it to do something. Play music, navigate to somewhere, do a search, whatever. You can do that now from the launcher itself. You don't have to launch Google now and then go into that. It doesn't sound like it's going to be ambient as it is with the Moto X, so we're not going to quite get that. And that makes sense because we don't have the dedicated processor like we do in the Moto X with the Nexus 4. But it opens the question, might we have that with other devices down the road with KitKat? And that question is unknown. Going back to where we were, it's going to be faster, not just because of the hardware, making fun of Steven there, but because they've gone through, Google's gone through and made a lot of optimizations to memory usage, not just in the operating system, but in the core apps. So everything is going to be quite a bit faster. Multitasking is faster. It's got a lighter footprint. So what that means is you're not going to need the latest and greatest hardware to be able to run this OS. It should run on older hardware every bit as good as the current versions of Android do on those hardware, and even better on up-level versions like what we have sporting the 800 processor and whatnot in there, and other high-end processors and other devices when we eventually see those running KitKat.
Someone is saying you can say, "Okay, Google," when the screen is off. I don't think that's true. Now, I know the Snapdragon 800 does support the ambient processing sort of capabilities where you can do that kind of stuff, but and as I say that, Joe drops off.
It's so timely, man.
The next time Joe says that T-Mobile 3G does him just fine, he doesn't need LTE. Let's all remind him of this moment, shall we?
He's on LTE.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that 4.4 is just a minor point upgrade. Joe just joined us again. Joe.
We made fun of you as you were.
T-Mobile HSPA Plus, buddy. T-Mobile HSPA Plus, man.
What are you talking about? I'm Wi-Fi to the building down the street.
Oh, snap.
Oh, damn. All right.
It's either that or LTE on my Nexus 4, right? So.
Yeah.
So the last I heard was somebody saying that you can say, "Okay, Google," when the screen is off. I haven't heard that either. Everything that I've seen has just been on the home screen, on one of your home screens. You can say that.
That's what I think I read on Google's description of it. Their little blog post.
Here is what I got from them. Quote, "You don't need to touch the screen to get things done. When you're home screen, or when you're on your home screen or in Google Now, just say, 'Okay, Google,' to launch, voice search, send a text, get directions, or even play a song." There's an asterisk over that, which says currently only available on the Nexus 5. So that doesn't sound cool, but we'll see how they do to integrate that. Any more questions there, or do you want to go on to other cool stuff?
What else do we get from KitKat? What other enhancements?
Okay, so core apps. They've done a lot in the core apps. One of the main things they've done is making the whole communication suite a lot more integrated, better, more intelligent. So in your, let's start out with a really cool thing. You now have integrated caller ID with your dialer. So if you get a call from somebody that's not in your address book, it's going to try and figure out who is calling you so it can show you that caller ID. Most of that seems like it's just business stuff rather than personal, but it'll be interesting to see how they do that.
Not only that, but you can enter the contacts app, and if you don't have a number entered, you can do reverse lookup as well, right? And you can just start type in pizza into your contacts app, and it'll find a local pizza. That's awesome. I love
and that's the other side of that. So the outgoing stuff, when you're making a call, it's going to automatically prioritize your contacts based on the people that are most important to you, but it's also going to search for nearby businesses and even people in your Google Apps domain. So if your company, your school, whoever it is, like Pocket Now, we use a Google Apps domain, it will search for people in that now as well. So it's doing a lot to make that contacting people a lot nicer and smoother. Next, we've got the big Hangouts Google Voice integration that we thought was coming a long time ago.
Is it Google Voice integration? I thought it was just the stock SMS. I didn't see anything about Google Voice, because if it's Google Voice, that means I'm incredibly excited. If not, then I'm
worried if it's voice. Hangouts are ruin voice.
I thought it was.
It's just stock SMS, unfortunately. It's stock SMS.
Is it?
Yeah, it doesn't have
Now that paired with.
And then I read that wrong. They worded that trickily.
But you can sync your Google Voice to your Messages app. So can you still do that with the Hangouts update?
You should be able to, I would believe. And I'm going to have to double check my other source, because the one that I'm reading right now confirms what you're saying, but the one that I was reading before implied that this is the same type of update like we saw on iOS, so I've got to go back and confirm that. I will have an article up on this later today, hopefully within the next hour or so, so we'll have all of the information there if any of this is incorrect. But you now even can send animated GIFs. They included that as a feature. So that feature that you
and emoji. Don't forget the emoji.
No, I'm not going to do that. And The last, but certainly not the least, power feature, if you will, is being able to print whenever you want, wherever you want. This is a feature that employs Google Cloud Print, which is something we've been able to do through an app in the Play Store, but now it's built into the core OS. So all kinds of neat. The main thing, the main take-home.
Raise your hand if you have a printer, everybody.
No!
We don't.
Functional or just?
Wait, like I was
You
gonna
know where
say,
I go if I need to print
Oh my
something?
God.
Kinko's.
Are we
Yeah.
EP now? Like, what's going on? Who cares? Print on a dead.
But that's just it, Taylor. If this will let you print to wherever you need to. So if you need to print that hotel reservation, or need to print that ticket, or need to print a map for somebody, and you're at Kinko's or you're at someplace else that has a Google Cloud connected printer, like those places will, you can send that information directly over there and get an old-fashioned cut-down-the-trees version of that information.
So
Michael's killing me over there.
It's most likely not Google Cloud connected either.
It's totally worthwhile. Like, everything Joe is saying is absolutely useful. I just can't stop laughing whenever somebody talks about printing as a feature. Like, it's hilarious.
It's like putting a diesel engine on a horse-drawn carriage. Like, no drivetrain, just the engine sitting there.
Right?
Wrong decade, people. Wrong decade.
Making voice calls a big feature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there you go. So ultimately, the big take-home behind KitKat, behind the 4.4 version of this, is the new launcher. It's the new streamlined apps, and making them all very, very lightweight, so that it's going to be able to run on a lot of the not only current hardware, Nexus 5 notwithstanding, but the stuff that you have in your pocket today, but also the older stuff and the kind of lower end stuff. I think they're doing this kind of to combat the whole Android is laggy thing that people are complaining about with the lower end devices, and I think it's probably a really good way to do it.
Yeah, but I think it's very optimistic of Google putting this 512 megabyte support in now. I think the manufacturers who released a lot of phones with that much RAM have moved on and aren't issuing updates anymore.
Yeah.
That's probably so, yes.
But this is a question that I have, Joe. I mean, we have a report from The Verge that says that Google is not going to be upgrading the Galaxy Nexus to Android 4.4. Why
the comments are full of that, by the way.
I don't understand why that would be. I mean, it could clearly, if they're making an OS that can run on lower spec hardware.
Even the Nexus 1 can run this.
Yeah, so basically, and I'm glad you brought this up because the irony is thick. Google has a habit of upgrading the one-down version of their devices. So the Nexus 4, they've already committed to. We're going to see Android 4.4 on the Nexus 4, quote, in the coming weeks. So whether that's 2 weeks, 4 weeks, a month and a half, I don't know. But we'll see it. The next version down, we won't. Not officially. And that's the same thing they did last time. But the point you're making is they are making this version of Android specifically capable of running on very, very relatively low-end hardware. So you'd think that they would break that rule and go ahead and publish it. And I like what Jaime was saying. Go down and do it on the Nexus S just to show that it can be done. For all 12 people who still have a Nexus S, show them you can do it and it runs great.
Wait, all 12 people who have a Nexus S whose devices weren't bricked by a Google update.
Which, if they weren't, half of them probably would be by with this one. But so we're down to half a dozen.
This is just an irony. I mean, even the Nexus 1 that was left behind with Gingerbread, even that phone can run this.
Yeah. According to what they say, it should be able to, and it was designed specifically to be able to do that.
Now,
but they're not.
As my favorite driver in Grand Theft Auto 5 says, this don't make no effing sense. Right?
And Joe, to finish up with Android 4.4, probably the biggest rumor, I guess, didn't happen then. So the Android launcher is not made available for everyone, I guess.
Not yet, at least. Have they said it's not going to happen?
Yeah, they specifically mention. Well, they specifically mention the launcher by name. They're calling it the Nexus launcher. I forget what it is, but I can note that. That's the first time I think I've ever seen them note the name of the launcher. It's always just been part of Android. So I think they're setting themselves up to be able to do that. But as of right now, no, it's not. And I wouldn't do it if I were them, because I'd want people to go out and buy my latest hardware before I release stuff that makes old hardware look like my new hardware.
Well, they're sold out, so they can do it now. All right.
What?
Oh, okay. Well, then go ahead and do that. It's in the Play Store.
Okay, so that would be Android 4.4. I guess the takeaway that we've got left here is compared to... So we have our resident #1 reviewer who's pretty much reviewed absolutely everything that's gone through our Pocket Now Labs, Mr. Michael Fisher.
He's reviewed everything ever.
Everything ever. So, okay, so you've pretty much reviewed everything out there, Michael. How do you see this phone stack up? We go back to the conversation of your thoughts on the design and how does it stack up to everything else out there?
If there's one thing I've learned, it's that not a lot of the people in the populace, in the general populace outside of geek circles, care all that much about hardware aesthetics, which is why we have this landscape of very, very similar looking hardware. So the Nexus 5 is not going to have any trouble because of that. I mean, it's not. And Google has never really positioned the Nexus line as this flagship class that needs to sell millions and millions of units to be considered a success, even though it will sell quite a bit, and I think it'll probably sell more than any other units. But, I mean, there's a lot of competition out there, and not least of which is from Android, and I don't know, because you don't need to sell so many Nexus devices, what needs to be, why does it need to compete effectively? I mean, you have all these phones out there that are selling for less on contract, not off contract certainly, but nobody in the U.S. buys phones off contract. So I don't know. I don't know
about that anymore. T-Mobile's on a big rise.
Yeah,
huge rise. Yeah, and they don't do contracts.
Right now, this is like the big break for T-Mobile. I mean, if T-Mobile would set it upon themselves to buy all the Nexus 5s for themselves and have this be like their flagship phone,
you can't have them.
So I feel like I have a pretty good pulse on the finger on the pulse of what normal people are talking about, because I have a lot of friends who are Luddites and who are not in our business. And they often ask me things about...
They're not really your friends, Michael.
About cellular telephony. And you know what? They ask me about a lot of stuff. And you know what? Not a single one of them has ever asked me about, ever? What's T-Mobile doing these days? None of the people in the Northeast, in my experience, know that T-Mobile exists. So I don't know.
They may not ask you because you hate T-Mobile.
What's that?
Yeah, they know you hate it, and they know you're not going to say anything nice. And if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all.
Yeah. No, I like what they're doing. But so I don't know. The T-Mobile destiny is not tied to the Nexus 5 destiny. I mean, this thing is gonna do some interesting stuff. I don't know. There's so much out there, as Joe Levi is fond of saying. There's so much out there on the market. It's such a great time to be alive, because there is so much out there. The Nexus 5 will stand out thanks to its Google backing, but I don't necessarily see it lighting the world on fire outside of the circles of people who really appreciate it.
No, it's not supposed to. It's absolutely not supposed to.
Kick the whole thing off. So I think what I was trying to say before was that I don't know if I can answer you because I don't understand the purpose of the question. Because when you have a product that doesn't need to succeed, what the hell is the point?
The point is the success is measured by showcasing the latest version of Android and doing so at a price for in this case, the top-of-the-line hardware that is almost half the price of what everybody else is selling their top-of-the-line hardware for. They're showing that it can be done, and they're showing that eventually you're going to have to keep your prices low to be able to do this. And if you look at the strategy, it's working. Google is taking over the world.
But who else can do this? Who else can be like Google with a
Samsung could. It has its own content library.
Why would it want to?
No,
and Microsoft.
Google can lose money on this, and Microsoft, has shown that for 3 years they've been burning money on Windows Phone because they can. But like, how long are you going to do this? And what does it ultimately matter? Yes, you're showcasing Android. Yes, you're driving prices down in your own ecosystem. But I don't know if that is gonna create a competitive impulse in everyone else to be like, oh God, Samsung, we got to lower our price on the Galaxy S4 from $749 to $649.
I'll give you a couple of examples.
That doesn't make any sense.
I'll give you a couple of examples. Do we all remember when the first iPhone was launched, Michael? You actually made the line to buy the phone.
No, the 3G I bought. Yeah.
You made the line for the 3G. Okay, so when the first iPhone was launched, obviously it was $500 on contract. But back then, you had for if you wanted to get a BlackBerry Pearl or a Razr, I think those phones were between $300 and $350 on contract. There were some crazy pricings back in 2007 for you to get phones on contract. And then the following year, after all the success of the first iPhone, Apple comes out of the blue and says, this is the new iPhone 3G, and now it's going to be $200 on contract. And that, ever since that launch of the iPhone 3G, the market price for high-end smartphones has been $200. $200 on contract, $200 on contract, and it's remained that way. So we could say that was an example of a disruptive, a great phone that was so disruptive that it made everybody drop their price. The same thing happened with the first Nexus 7. We had a market of $500 tablets, and when they least expected, Amazon tried to do it with the Kindle, but it wasn't strong enough. So comes out Google with their Nexus 7, and everybody's like, okay, $200 is the price for the small tablets. Let's do that, and everybody's doing that.
I think you're downplaying the Kindle's effect on that. I think Amazon really had a big impact when the Kindle Fire came out. I mean, that was a big deal. It wasn't a very good product, but it was a big deal. And I don't think tablets are analogous to smartphones in this sense. I mean, your iPhone example is a very good one. The difference is the iPhone was a groundbreaking shift in how smartphones operated. The Nexus 5 is not that.
Good point.
It's an iterative improvement.
Good point. Good point. Now that being said, I feel that sure. I mean, it's not it's not disruptive enough when it comes to technology. I just feel that the phone is so future-proof that the only problem that I see right now, and this is probably my perspective, is the distribution of this phone. If this phone were available on every carrier today, and if this phone were available on Best Buy, Target, and just about every store today, and Google really focused on distributing this phone hard, kind of how they did with the Nexus 7, at least on certain retailers, then I would feel that this phone would be disruptive enough to drop the price of the market. I feel that the problem is the distribution.
Nexus 5 headed to Sprint, T-Mobile, Amazon, Best Buy, and Radio Shack in the coming days. That's from Todd Haselton of Techno Buffalo.
They changed
I reject your reality and substitute my own.
Okay, so...
Sorry. I just saw that.
Okay, I want to take Michael in the Wayback Machine just for a minute.
Yeah, I love that machine.
Michael, do you remember way back when there were rumors about Google coming out with a Google phone? We're talking pre-G1.
Yeah.
And Google denied it. We are not making a Google phone. There's not going to be a Google phone, blah, 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 blah. Way before, and then people started thinking, wait a minute, Google does everything for free. Everything they offer is free. So if Google comes out with a phone, it's going to be for free. And people were thinking free cell phone, free service, free hardware, free everything, which we all know wasn't true, right? But everybody was kind of getting stoked about, what if it's free? What if it's free? Fast forward to today, we have something where you said they're losing money. We're still paying for it, but not as much as we could be or could otherwise have been. So are we getting to the point now where we're starting to realize the fact that Google is making enough money off of us and selling our information to other people that they're really not losing the money on the devices? They're making a whole boatload of money on the, well, we're the product that's being sold, not the phone.
Yeah, no.
So do you think that's where we are now? Have we finally realized that free phone mentality that we had originally?
Yeah, we would be if the Nexus line was what was driving Android sales, but it's not. What's driving Android is skinned to hell Samsung devices that do not resemble anything like the Nexus line.
But we go back.
To be changing.
We go back to the distribution topic, Michael. Why is the Galaxy S such a popular phone in my country? It is simply because I've already seen 4 people on the street with a Galaxy Note 3. I pulled it out of the box and I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna be like the first guy here with a Note 3. This is gonna be freaking awesome. And I just go to the mall to go look for a case, a Note 2 case for this phone, and I walk into the store and they're like, oh, you got it. Did you buy it at the other store? Because we already have it. And then I see 3 guys there sitting down buying them. And they're like, and we've already got the cases.
That's such a sad moment.
Okay, and I've only seen one HTC One. ever since April that it launched. So for me, it's a distribution issue. The Galaxy is popular simply because it's the ubiquitous smartphone that's available everywhere.
It's not availability. I mean, it's marketing.
Obviously, marketing and availability. Fine. Let's join those two things together.
Sure, you're 90-10, yeah.
Yeah, let's join those two things together. But going back to the topic, I do feel that if what Joe just said. Taylor just said. We just lost Joe.
Goodbye, Joe.
Okay, so nice knowing you. Carriers.
Don't go war driving to do Hangouts. So.
Okay, so if this phone is going to be available on these carriers, and think about it, if Sprint would do the bold thing of offering this phone free on contract,
it would be bold.
That would be very bold.
They've got deeper pockets now that they're owned by SoftBank, so I mean that would be a really interesting move on their part. Absolutely.
I mean, think about it. This would be the first Google phone, literally, that would actually. It has the capability and the pricing from Google to be a free on-contract phone.
Yeah,
that would be amazing. I mean, that sounds a lot more like something T-Mobile would do, but that would be cool if Sprint took the opportunity to usurp them. To just beat them to the.
It's not going to help them though.
But T-Mobile doesn't have contracts; they can't do that.
Yeah.
No.
Reputation
I'm not necessarily saying that this would be big on Sprint. I'm saying that if AT&T and Verizon and the rest of the carriers would pull this phone free on contract, now that would be disruptive.
What I want to know is what T-Mobile's going to sell this thing for as like in terms of installments. Because if they're selling it at the Google price, so $350 or $400, on your installments are going to be like $15 a month.
I really think that's unlikely, though.
I mean, last year with the Nexus 4, they sold it for what, $500?
Yeah, I mean they
whatever, $550.
Knocked it up over the base price.
Yeah, but that was a different T-Mobile. Remember that.
It was.
So I mean, that's compelling. If you can get a phone and finance it for $10 or $15 a month, no contract, unlimited LTE,
communications, a great camera, LTE. I mean, why not?
It's T-Mobile,
and it will sell in very respectable numbers. It will never sell. It will never take over the driving force of Android unless it's marketed as well as. There are two Joes in the ribbon. Unless it's marketed as well as
spreading.
I need to say, before I give up the floor, there are three things that are happening. One, we're all having a great time talking. Two, we all need to be writing something. And three, I really have to pee. So we should go soon, yeah?
Same here. This was supposed to be a 30-minute thing, guys. Sorry. I guess the conversation just got so carried out. Regardless, we've got some opposing thoughts. Some people love this phone. I do. Some people are not really surprised by this phone, like Michael, which is great. That's the way the market behaves. I guess the biggest takeaway is that if Google would figure out a way to get the carriers involved with this phone and sell it and give this phone free on contract or for $350 off contract, this could be, again, you can buy an iPhone 5S 16 gigs for $650 unlocked. And then it's $200 on contract. So there is no reason why a free on contract would not work for this phone if carriers would jump on board.
Prepaid.
Or even $149. Ooh, or prepaid.
We're making some big assumptions about what Google would charge the carriers, though. And I don't think it's selling the phone at a loss to begin with. I just think it's not making any profit. If it's going to sell to the carriers and get them involved, I think it's going to want to profit off this.
Well, $350 is already not profiting, but we'll see. We'll see. I guess.
Can I jump in with some breaking news here, Jaime?
Sure.
KitKat, according to HTC USA's Twitter account, customers who love candy, LOL, KitKat is coming to the HTC One in the US in 90 days.
Ow. 90 days.
Ouch.
90 days.
Having been
beat it up, guys.
So
having been briefed rather thoroughly about the upgrade process that manufacturers, the dance that they go through.
You're using a Galaxy phone expected by the end of next year. Shoot.
Whatever happened to the Android Partner Program or whatever it was called?
Yeah, that didn't really.
It's terrible. But let's wrap this up, gentlemen, because Michael is not the only person that needs to go to the bathroom right now. Final thoughts, Mr. Martin?
I have a lot to write.
Are you buying?
I will buy probably eventually. Not right now. I'm enjoying the Note 3 still, so not immediately, but I will eventually buy it. I bought 2 Nexus 4s and 2 Galaxy Nexuses and a Nexus S and 2 Nexus 1s. So the odds are I'll probably buy 1 or 2 eventually.
It's not if, but when.
You gotta buy 2 so they're not lonely.
Mr. Joe Levi, final thoughts. You're definitely buying. You already
mine's already bought. It was in the first batch. It should be here soon. It's the 32 gig white for all who want to know. But ironically, I already have that Spigen Ultra Fit case, which is black.
All right. All right, Mr. Michael Fisher, you have my Galaxy Nexus, my friend. So after you're done with your review of the Nexus 5, and since you don't like the phone, I'm sure you're going to put it in a box and ship it to Honduras.
Fat chance.
Okay, so you already have a phone ordered because you're going to review it, but final thoughts? Not happy?
The review will come in. No, listen. I don't want to say that I'm not happy. I am excited to see what the hell this thing is all about and to get inside it and use it. Would I buy it personally? Probably not. I mean, everything that it does, my Moto X essentially already does, except for the whole pictures thing, which are crappy on this. Yeah. But I'm very much looking forward to getting inside of it. I'm sure 1,500 commenters are already preparing their rebuttals to any negative thing I have to say about anything about it. But no, rest assured, I am maintaining an open mind, and I'm actually really, really jazzed for it to show up at my door. And there was something else I was going to say, but I forgot. Oh, yeah, the Moto X is going to get KitKat as well soon, according to Motorola.
I am going to tell you one thing, Michael, that I will require a ransom for your iPad 3.
So something happened to either my or your internet.
It's Taylor. I didn't understand anything.
Yeah. Taylor, you were suddenly like Daft Punk. I don't know what you were saying.
That's awesome, but I said that the Nexus 5 is the ransom for your iPad 3.
Oh, you can go ahead and keep that, brother.
All right, Steven, final thoughts. I'm really curious as to you, Steven, because you're not like I'm crazy to get the newest, latest phone.
Yeah, I'm on the fence about this. In fact, while we were talking here, I muted my mic, I went back over to check if they were in stock. I almost ordered one. I'm on the fence, though. I love the hardware. It's just I'm not completely sold on Android 4.4 and this ever-encroaching everything's Google+. I got to try it out first on my Nexus 4, I think, before I commit to a new phone that's going to be 4.4 from the start. But I'm really tempted.
Give it to the Plus.
No.
Something went wrong there.
No, but nobody knows what you're saying, Taylor. Get a different internet connection.
Yeah, all I heard was a fart.